Yes. All right, we are live. Let me see if I see that live stream. Your
Hello, everybody.
I think you got it. Why so few alt finance people? Oh, but there are two, so you'll have to kill the other one.
Yeah, there's always two.
Also, I only see my watching your video, I only see my screen. I don't see you. Now I see you. Oh, I think
Okay.
it's doing this thing where whoever makes the most noise gets on the screen, but it's not both of us at the same time.
Well, okay, I'm putting this one on mute. Okay, got it. Hey guys, looks like we have everything up and running now. Phil, you there?
I am.
Okay, got it. So you raised a very important, wouldn't call it really is a really important issue that kind of puts people like me and you in a corner because we're part of a larger community of sound money people that understand the basics of what money really is and what's going to happen in the end. And though anyone in the sound money community you ask would say that we're going to end in hyperinflation because it's inevitable, almost none of them want to say it's imminent. So the question is that because they really don't think it's imminent, or is it that they don't want to be painting themselves into a corner to always sound like an alarmist, or is it marketing, or is it something they really believe, or is it just something that can't be believed because it's so extreme that people don't even want to think about it?
Yeah, it is a very intense thought. Just so you know, the YouTube, we are not side by side on the video. It's like who's ever talking the most gets the screen. I don't know
Okay,
if you
so
want to
let's
fix that or
see.
not. Well,
Is that better?
hold on. We're there's a few second delay here.
I changed it to gallery.
Gallery. Give it 1 second.
Here's my Twitter handle for anyone who forgot.
There we go. Yes, now we're correct. Okay, we're good.
Okay, good.
So what inspired me to ask this question, I was watching Nobody Special Finance, who I really like. He's definitely on our side, good guy. And he was doing his Friday live stream with his moderator. It's very similar to our show, and they were talking about how the dollar is dying, and they said, and they can see that the Fed's going to have to go ZERP and Burr very very soon. ZERP is the zero interest rate policy, and Burr is the sound of the money printer. So they call it ZERP and Burr in one word. So they can see it's gonna have to go ZERP and Burr, but they said, there's no currency in the wings to take over. So it's gonna be, and he said this with complete confidence, that it's gonna be another decade before something else shows up to take over as the world reserve currency. And my thought, and I've actually written to him a couple times, but he's a very big audience, so he's a busy man. Doesn't get my emails, or just thinks I'm another crackpot emailing him. I don't know. But I think he is unwilling to see the void of nothing replacing the death of the dollar, or not the void of nothing, but it would be gold. And the sort of the shutdown of the international monetary system, the abrupt shutdown of the international monetary system. I think people don't necessarily want to wrap their minds around that.
They don't, but I mean, I've noticed a logical flaw in, I guess, Nobody Special Finance's reasoning that you don't need anything to replace the dollar, right?
Right.
He's still thinking in terms of currency as money, which it isn't.
Yes.
No, right. Hold on. My phone. Okay.
Well,
Um,
I think in the modern age, so this is getting a little bit off track. Like, I think there will be something very quickly private will pop in immediately. Like, it'll be one of these gold-backed cryptocurrencies or something like that will just pop. I think they'll just be like, whoop, we'll start using that for international trade. And then maybe governments will take it over, but that's what I see happening fairly quickly. I don't see us going back to like Neolithic farming because we can't figure out how to trade internationally anymore, so we all starve to death. I don't see that happening.
um, yeah, you were talking about though that when this thing does fall apart, there's going to be no way to fund huge pieces of capital, so trade is going to have to break into smaller pieces. So meaning maybe international trade is just not going to be as necessary as it is now in a globalized world because everything is
Right.
operated by huge pieces of capital that can't be maintained when there's no, inflationary money to fund it. So I'm not saying international trade is going to completely die,
Yeah.
but
Also
but
depends
what
on where you are. I mean, Amsterdam. Well, Amsterdam actually probably can feed itself, but Belgium is going to have to trade with other countries. I don't know. Can Israel feed itself?
I don't know.
Yeah. So if you
Um,
can't feed yourself, you're going to have to trade with other countries, and what that's going to look like on the other side. But yeah, I do agree. Like we're not like Walmart is not going to be there anymore. Like you're not going to go to Walmart and get a teapot made in China. You're going to go to get a local teapot in America. It's going to be made locally.
yeah.
Now, what that looks like and how long that takes to get going is anybody's guess.
I mean, the countries that won't be able to feed themselves, they're the ones that heavily overly invested in, let's say, tech or computer programming or high tech stuff, and kind of went out of the commodities trade and stopped growing food because there's no money in food. Right? All the money was in because of this inflationary boom that we've had for the last 50 years. The real money is in the top layers, which is not in the food layers. Right. So ironically, it's like Africa and these poor countries that grow food, they're going to be much better off than, let's say, Hong Kong, which is going to be in big trouble. I mean, Hong Kong is just one big tech hub. It's just a finance hub. What are they going to have? So this is another reason why I'm in the Golan, because there's farms all over the place.
Yeah.
And whether a country can feed itself, it's really it's a loaded question because maybe in the current state they can't, but when the prices of food go way higher and the prices of tech and all this inflationary stuff that we've built up over the past 50 years, when those prices plummet, then the incentive is going to be to grow more food, which is that's going to stop people from starving, but that takes time.
It does take time, yeah. Yeah, I've got an order of Jerusalem artichokes on the way. I know I've talked about that before, but I'm gonna plant. I'm gonna have rows in the back.
By the way, they're really good making latkes out of them, like during
Are
Hanukkah
they?
time. Yeah, or the instead of potato pancakes,
Yeah.
you do Jerusalem artichoke pancakes. You grate them on the grater, and then you squeeze them out, and then put some garlic in, some salt, and some olive oil, and you're good to go.
There you go. Are they gas inducing? I've heard they're gas inducing. Their nickname is
Everything
fartichokes.
to me is gas inducing.
Uh,
I don't know if it's especially. It might be. Yeah, I think
I
it is.
just the reason I'm just picking one crop and I'm gonna plant it all and then trade if I need
Mhm.
to. I can't farm, so I figured I'll pick something that absolutely will not die on me, and I can trade for berries or whatever, goat meat, like my
Mhm.
original videos. Anyway, sorry, we're getting way off track here. The
Yeah.
So the question is, so from what I can see for the alt finance guys, who can see who has a similar thought is people like Gregory Mannarino seems to be, his instincts are excellent. The
Mhm.
only thing I disagree with him on is Bitcoin is an investment vehicle. And maybe I think he's a professional trader, so he's in the market. Whereas my view would be that's like the center of the blast radius. I wouldn't necessarily be in the market. Now he says he can take everything out on a dime. So, hopefully he's not going to get caught with his pants down. I don't know.
And that's what everyone says. That's like, a heroin addict saying when you first get started, I
That's
can stop
exactly
whenever I want. I can stop whenever I want, and then you can't. But it's everyone imagines that. That's one of the pitfalls of trading. You imagine that, oh, buy low, sell high. So when it's low, I'll buy, and when it's high, I'll sell, and that's just how you do it. But
Yeah.
it never works that way. It never works
Yeah.
that way.
Well, so I'm reading, this ties into the other topic I was thinking of. I'm reading When Money Dies, which is about the Weimar hyperinflation. And it
Yeah, I
actually
read
should be
that.
called When Currency Dies, because money doesn't die. But the author is not he's not what I would consider someone who understands Austrian economics at all. He's very the way
He's
he
a
writes.
politician. He's a parliamentarian, right?
Was that who he was? Okay.
Adam Ferguson. I think he
Yeah.
was a parliamentarian. A statesman, like when politicians were actually, some of them, somewhat respectable.
Yeah.
So,
But he talks I can tell in the book, like he doesn't quite, like, money is some sort of symbol of the state's productive capacity. Like that's the way he
yeah.
sees it. And the problem was just that Germany couldn't get their productive capacity over their ability to print notes, and they were subsidizing everything. But he didn't, like, there was no Excuse me. Now he did know that, like, he did note that the other currencies like the dollar and the pound that were coming into Germany to buy, all and sundry at, pennies on the dollar were called the gold currencies by the German. Like there was some German where, and it was like, it meant like gold, golden currencies. And they were, they liked them because they were fully backed by gold. He didn't quite make the connection, that you and I would make. Okay, well, the gold is the money, and it's the symbolism of the gold, and the fact that the mark is, losing its already tenuous connection is, disappearing. So where was I? There was a point I was making. What drove us to this point?
You were talking about when money dies, how you disagree that the title should be when currency dies.
When currency dies, yeah. We were talking about something before that. I got sidetracked. I had a line of thought and I lost it. What comments? What was I saying? If anyone can help me.
Well, you can get back to it, but
okay.
I wanted to hear more what you were thinking about. Why is it that so few people are saying or will ever say that the end game is imminent? Because what I am hearing more in the technical traders that I'm following, I'm hearing more desperation in their voices. Like this is the time when gold has to prove itself. And if it doesn't prove itself, then I'm going to question gold's entire role in the financial system. And maybe Keynes was right. Maybe it's just a barbarous relic that has no bearing anymore. And we have to seriously consider that if gold doesn't rally in these conditions, which it sounds, if someone's going to say that means they're really desperate. And they're willing to throw out the most basic of all monetary laws because they don't like how gold is trading.
What kind of position are they? I guess that's a weird position if they're like, I'm abandoning my basic tenets if this one trade doesn't go quite my way.
He wasn't saying a specific trade. He wasn't saying this. I just bought gold yesterday. If it doesn't go up right now, I'm gonna throw out all of my tenets. But what I would say is that wait, you remember what you were going to talk about?
I do.
Okay,
so speculate. So one of the things that occurred during this during the Weimar hyperinflation was wild speculations, and people, they would just move from one trade thing to and this is like a shoe shine boy or something is getting into the markets because it's like the only way to try and keep up with the hyperinflating currencies. And all the gold is being the second any gold appears, it's being extracted to pay off the entente. So there really is no option. There is no safe haven except for foreign currencies and hyperinflationary speculations. And so I would expect something similar. I can go into it in a little more detail later, but I would expect something similar to occur in America or in the world when the dollar starts dying, is that there's going to be things that are going to wildly outperform gold temporarily. So whether it's Bitcoin or AI stock or something, you're going to look stupid for holding gold during those periods because you're like, oh, well, you should be buying crypto. It just did a 1,000xer. But then then the people that jump in at the last minute get washed out, and they're even poorer than they were had they just buried the hyperinflated currency in their backyard. So there's going to be these waves of speculation that fly into things that we can't even imagine what they're going to fly into now.
You think that's still ahead? You don't think we've been through that? I mean,
it's going to get worse. I think it's going to get
speculation.
I think it's getting much worse. I think it's going to be wild, like you wouldn't believe.
This is all so tiring.
And you're gonna, but that's gonna be like that froth is gonna be one of the symbols of like gold is gonna, in dollar terms, it's gonna just keep steadily going and at an exponential rate as well. But there's gonna be these investment opportunities that make gold holders look really stupid.
So you're saying that as gold goes higher and higher and higher, faster and faster, then other asset classes will go faster than gold and then crash, and then faster than gold and then crash.
Yeah, and it'll be pure speculation. I mean, it'll be like Beanie Babies. It'll just be Beanie Babies are one day up, 1,000,000 billion%, and then the next day they're back down, and people are just going to get washed out. Yeah, several times. Yeah. Now, the difference between reading the Weimar book, When Money Dies, is they didn't like gold was not really an option for most people, just because it was, it was all confiscated. You know, they really did have jackboots on the streets trying to confiscate it. So if you have access, if you have access to stacks and stuff, then you can dodge a lot of that craziness. You're not forced to participate in speculations. And one of the horror stories,
back then the dollar was the gold.
Right. They were confiscating foreign currencies as well, but people would people do what they do is hide that stuff under their mattress.
Yeah. I mean, it would be interesting to try to figure out how much they were actually able to confiscate versus how much was hidden.
Yeah. There are a bunch of sad stories in that book of especially early on when people weren't really understanding what was happening. The people that were loyal to the system, loyal to the state, they they described one woman, I think her son was serving in the Austrian army and probably got killed or something. And, she had a stipend and her husband had recently passed. So she had a bunch of savings and she talked to a bank, she talked to her financial manager. And he was saying, look, you might want to convert some of this into Swiss francs and we can store it in this account in Switzerland for you. And she's like, no. I believe in the German state. They're going to take care of me. And by, a year or a year and a half later, I mean, she's selling her grand piano for a sack of potatoes and, the whole thing, and she was well-to-do, she was a well-to-do woman. And they were talking. Oh, I remember exactly what I was going to bring up before. So in the Weimar, the workers, the farmers, the workers, people that were producing active things typically did very, very well. I mean, not very, very well, but did much better relative to people like a retired German army officer. Like those guys, the retired German army officer living on the stipend, with his leg missing and an eye patch because he can't work anymore. They would starve to death in the streets. They would, because they were too prideful to ask for help and say like, guys, I'm broke, and go sell chewing gum on the street like a homeless person, right? They were too full of pride. So those people starved to death and just would collapse on the street. And apparently it happened with regularity. And but like a farmer could buy the grand piano for the sack of potatoes, and the workers working for export companies could get their hands on dollars and pounds and things like that. So they did relatively well. I wouldn't, there were a few people that were really cashing in who knew how the game was played, but.
But then again, it's a much different society now, because 1923 was just 5 years after World War I.
Yeah.
And World War I, Germans were really starving. They were already used to bad conditions, and they already had exercise in what they're supposed to be doing when society goes that poor. So they were already trained for it. But now America is still, even though inflation is bad, very few people are starving in the streets. People are going mentally insane. That's true, but they're still fed. So if this thing happens as fast as I think it will, then there's not going to be any time for these people to train themselves in how they're supposed to deal with this. And that's when you have potential zombie hordes.
Yeah. Well, there's also not going to be there's not going to be the man nobly suffering in the street. I mean, there's not the loyalty to the state has been, subsumed by communism for the past 10 years. So,
Yeah.
The people that would be willing to suffer like that, I don't think exist either, at least not in large quantities. Where was I? We got sidetracked again. We were talking about the alt tech people the alt finance people on YouTube that don't believe, or that don't see the end game as imminent. So I was talking about Gregory Mannarino. He calls it imminent. He said something's going to blow very, very soon. And I think Gerald Celente also does as well. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
At least something along those lines. But I know, Nobody Special Finance and Economic Ninja has some sort of idea that inflation is coming, but I don't think he understands the concept of what a hyperinflation is. Like he thinks there's going to be this like sudden boost up in prices of everything, and then it's just going to level off there, and then that's what's going to be the new operating environment.
That's not possible.
That's not possible. Yes. Like I said, I wouldn't. I question his ninjutsu in economics. Again,
Anyway,
I like the guy. I watch all these people. I'm not trying to degrade them. I like them all.
so what I was talking about with those comments that if gold doesn't go up now, then I'm just going to question its entire place in the financial system. And Keynes was right, and it's barbarous relic, and this and that. I would be willing. It's not going to happen because I'm right, but theoretically, where I would say, okay, I'm wrong about everything, is if the Fed prints again, twice as much as it printed in 2020, 2021, and then prices stabilize or something like that. I mean, that I would say, okay, fine. Well, I guess, gold's not money anymore and it's really the dollar. And but I know it's not going to happen. So,
well, even that, I mean, if they double the money and everyone just pours it into investment opportunities, then yeah, then the consumer goods won't be affected that much. Now, real estate will double again, but and car financing, the price of cars might double again, but like then iPhones and well, actually iPhones might go up too, but food wouldn't go up that much if that happens. But I don't think it will. I think you're right. I mean, clearly, I think you're right that this flood is gonna go straight into consumer goods this time.
And I keep seeing that whenever the reverse repos run out, that should be it, because I don't see how the current economic structure can handle 5% rates without a constant stream of extra money that was printed 2 years ago flowing into the system. It's not going to work. I mean, I think it was 2018, 2019 when they started hiking rates and they went up to like 2% and then everything crashed. I think it was October 2018 and they had to stop hiking rates at that point again. So that was 2%. So how are we handling 5% if you couldn't handle 2% back then? And the answer is because there's still extra money floating around that has to drain out.
Yeah, the reverse repo, you can see that they kind of went, there's that hyperinflationary curve, and then they went above the curve, so they can drain back down to wherever that curve is. But if they get below that curve, yeah, you're right. There's going to be financial panics.
Yeah,
I think I think it's a cycle. I mean, there is some of it. I think is the reputational risk. Because there are people who've been Who's that guy? Jim Rickards. He's been crash calling for like 20 years or something. He's like, this is the end. I think he's been doing it since the .com. And yeah, if you call the end game that many times, you look like the boy who cried wolf. So I think a lot of these guys don't necessarily want to risk their reputation on that. And I think to stare into the abyss of the end game is probably psychologically difficult as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, well, we can look at past hyperinflations, and from the outside, they don't seem that horrible. Because 1923, Germany didn't just annihilate itself. It's not like millions of people died. I mean, how many people do you think really starved to death? I think life was miserable, but people pretty much survived it. Right? In Zimbabwe too. I mean, there's probably life is very difficult there.
Yeah.
But there's still people walking around, and they seem to be fed, even though very very difficult situation. It's not like a zombie war zone or anything. There's still a country, or at least humans living. So I guess people think of hyperinflation, the dollar, and they think, well, okay, yeah, it'll be difficult, it'll be tough, and then we'll just rebuild. But when you're talking about a reserve currency, and that's just a word, reserve currency. When you're talking
it's just the common denominator everyone's using.
Yeah. When you're talking about the currency that everything else is denominated in, you're talking about not just a single country where the price system is whacked out. You're talking about the entire planet. And that's something that none of us have lived through or even have experienced. The closest we can come to that is the collapse of the Roman Empire. That's the closest we can do.
Yeah. And that was not a good time.
Yeah, no. And how much did the population of the world shrink from the collapse of the Roman Empire until, I guess, the depths of the Dark Ages? I mean, it did shrink, didn't it?
I think yes, but there were also like plagues. I mean, there were a couple of very large plagues. The Antonine.
Yeah, but that's a function of the lack of services and lack of sanitation. When everyone's poor and no one can afford to build latrines, you just shit in the street, and then it makes plagues. That's what happens. I mean, that was probably one of the reasons behind the bubonic plague, why it got so bad. People were just too poor to wash themselves, and then an opportunistic infection arises and kills everybody.
Good Lord. You're really cheerful today. So one thing I want one window of optimism I want to open here is, reading this When Money Dies book. One of the reasons the Weimar lasted so long was that they couldn't default. They were not allowed to default. They weren't, because the Allies were like, we want gold. Like, you better give us those gold marks. We don't want your paper marks. We want the gold marks. So every time they'd come into a little bit of money, every time the government tried to raise a little bit, the Allies would come in and say, take this, or we're taking we're taking this the Ruhr Valley or the Rhineland or whatever. So they had to stay in that state for much longer than a normal situation. This is not going to happen in America. It's not possible for China and Russia to physically invade America and take them over and force that kind of debt repayment. What's going to happen is America's going to say, oh, whoopsie poopsie, dollar's not worth anything anymore. Sorry, everybody. And then it's going to go, and then, it'll be over within 3 to 6 months.
You mean from the point where treasuries collapse to 6 months later, we can reset on some kind of stable gold standard? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be a happy time. And in 6 months is plenty of time to starve to death. So, but it's not going to be, I think the Weimar was a 5-year rolling hyperinflation. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be much shorter, brutal. I agree with your assessment. It's just going to be
from 1918 to 1923.
Yeah.
What I never understood, what I still don't understand, is how they got out of it. Do you understand that? They replaced the mark with the Renton mark at 1 trillion to 1, but then what? Where did they get the gold from to stabilize things? Did they even use gold? What happened? How did they do it?
I haven't gotten to that part of the book yet.
I read it. I read that part of the book. I read the whole book. He doesn't really explain it. He just says it was very lucky that the Renton mark was trading with the mark at 1 trillion to 1, so they just lopped off 12 zeros and then everything was fine. Like, there's something missing here. Like, I saw the same thing when I was looking for how Israel was able to overcome its own hyperinflation in 1984, and I came across this what was it called? Not Bare Bones, Old Bones. It's some kind of like Israeli cartoon, Jewish humor kind of thing. Dry Bones. And it was talking about how Israel got over the hyperinflation. And this was like a cartoon in 1985, 1986, like right after it happened. And saying like hyperinflation was so horrible. And then we changed the currency, and then everything was fine. And we don't even know how we did it. And that was the conclusion. But how they did it was basically they repegged to the dollar, and then the Bank of Israel promised not to directly finance government deficits anymore. That was how it was done, right? You have an existing stable currency, you do a currency IPO, you peg to that thing, and then you promise, like, I'm not going to print money like I did before. So that's how they did it. I don't know how the Germans did it in 1922 to 1924. It was like,
well, the ring mark was, I think, based on land, because they didn't have any gold. And I think they were able, they based it on, I think, land. It was technically like somehow maybe not even redeemable for land, but it was like representing a certain amount of land somewhere. I'm not exactly sure either. But I do know they were eventually able to export enough stuff to get gold. And I guess maybe the Allies stopped knuckle breaking their, I think the Allies let them actually build up some gold reserves.
How? By selling their exports for dollars.
Yeah. And then pegging that to whatever the new currency was. I don't know. I haven't gotten to that point in the book yet, and I don't know if the book will explain it. And maybe I'll have to do some more research ever, because that's a excellent point, and we should know how that happens so we can see, maybe understand what's going to happen on the other side of this one.
Yeah, I don't know.
So in the chat, somebody was saying Mineko 64. We forgot our friend Mario to bring up.
Okay, what about him?
Oh, where is he on the prediction of the end game, on the imminent? As far as I know, he has his feet in both. He said,
yeah, he's not too explicit about whether he thinks it's going to be in the next few months or next few years. He just takes things as they come. which I guess is the conservative approach, and I don't fault him for that, because
Yeah.
I could be wrong, we could be wrong, but
Well,
just
if
yeah.
you are wrong, I wouldn't say that disproves your theory. It's just the timing of it. I mean, it's not, you know, we misunderstood, we misguessed how much bullshit the rest of the world was willing to take, like how many fake dollars the world was willing to take before giving up. That's the only thing we'd be giving up, because the dollars are they're gonna try and jam them down everyone else's throats the second they get printed, because America alone cannot bear that burden. So some of that's gonna be, you know, does China sell all their bonds? Does Japan sell all their bonds? If they do another massive bond buying operation, then yeah, maybe there is some more room.
Just by the way that the entire world is erupting into war, I don't think there's that much time left. It's in terms of believing the state, or being in line with their expectations. Something else is happening now. Like there's, because faith in the state or faith in their institutions is really the faith in the currency. It's just an extension of the faith in the currency. So what's happening now is that the north here has been evacuated, or the northern border towns. I'm not in a border town, like the ones really on the border with Syria and Lebanon.
Yep.
Those towns have been evacuated. The south has been evacuated, and we have the situation now where the evacuees that are in the host cities, they can have school, but the actual communities can't have school, because what's it called, the Pikuda Orif, the how do you say Pikuda Orif in English? The people, the wing of the government that decide, like Homeland Security, I would say it's the Homeland Security people. They say, oh no, you can't have classes because there's rockets everywhere, which is true. But the chances of getting hit by one are very, very small. And the chances of your child getting hurt because they're not sending into school for another year is much greater. Like that's the future of the country. And people are saying, like, why this doesn't make any sense. Why are the refugees, why are they allowed to go to their special school in their evacuation towns, but the people of those towns can't go to school? And well, this doesn't make any sense. And you're thinking, yeah, it doesn't make any sense, but it's not any one person making this decision. It's like, let's have a policy where the evacuees can go to school, but the people of the actual town can't go to school, because that makes sense. It's not any one person is deciding this. You have different hands of the monster that are saying different things within their own narrow logic. Like Homeland Security says, rockets, no school. Evacuation says these people are evacuated, and I'm in charge of the evacuees now. They should have school because they're evacuated. And then these two arms are contradictory, and that's just what you have. But that shows that it's not that the government itself doesn't make any sense. It's that it has no ability to make sense, because it's so diverse and convoluted, with different parts of it not controlling other parts of it, that this is now what the system gives you, something that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And the only way to fix that is to tear the whole damn thing down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the madness of I mean, you know, the madness of bureaucracy really has no end.
Yeah, there's no intelligence behind it. It's just an emergent. It's like
emergent
consciousness.
phenomenon.
It's like consciousness is an emergent property. Well, dumbassery is like an emergent property of big government. It just gets worse.
It's the opposite of the invisible hand, right? Or the inverse invisible hand.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for us? You can toss it.
The other topic that you were interested in discussing was, is a Rothbardian anarchy even possible?
Yes.
If you want to get to that.
Sure. First, let's see if there's anyone have any questions.
Neil is dropping truth bombs again.
I don't know. Oh, Neil, I'm collecting seashells. Have more. Oh, he's talking about seashells, using seashells as a currency. I actually went over that on my very first episode of my channel. I said the seashells don't make a good money because they're not uniform, and they're also not divisible. You know, you can't, if you break a seashell in half and pass it off, it's not, it's not good. It's not as useful. Yeah, okay. Oh, we don't have any questions, so I can continue. Is a Rothbardian anarchy possible? And even if everybody, so let's say everybody is like you and me, where we understand what that means, and we can minimize government to nothing or almost nothing, My thought is, let's say you put your money in the bank. Let's say you're the bank, you run a bank of Rafi and I run a bank of Phil, right? And you can see I am undercutting you on interest rates. And we have a real true sound money system. So you can see that I'm probably engaging in some fractional reserve banking. So you send your guys over to short me, basically. What do you do again? You make a deposit and then call it.
Yeah, I would call my deposits.
You call it deposit. So in a Rothbard, in a true anarchy,
Well,
once
you would have notes for your bank, and I would collect those notes from other people who pay me, and then I would just redeem them at your bank to see if you can take the money.
Now, what if I was to hire some goons to come break your thumbs and tell you to stop redeeming the notes?
I would have to hire my own goons to protect myself.
Yeah, okay, but now we're in a shooting war. Like now the Bank of
Yeah.
Rafi and the Bank of Phil are shooting.
Look, that's where it always goes to. Because so the question is, the ultimate question is, do you want competing forces that that threaten violence, or do you want one big force that threatens violence over everyone?
Everyone, yeah.
Right. So you could say in a Hobbesian or Hobbesian way,
Yeah,
that it's better to have everyone threatened by one single force of violence, but then you make everything extremely fragile, and one crazy guy or one emotionally unstable decision could end the planet.
yeah, that's just especially with the nukes. What do you think of McNukes, like the personal ownership of nuclear weapons?
No, I'm against that.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're in rocket range, so I can see why you would be.
I think Walter Block goes into this in the personal ownership of nuclear weapons. It's illegitimate because nuclear weapons can't distinguish innocent from guilty, or can't. They're too fat finger, and it's not a legitimate war weapon. But
Oh, good. We do have a question with a bunch of hearts.
Yeah.
Print special question: how many banks need to go down before the fiat printing? They'll
One.
all go down at one time if the fiat printing doesn't go back on. So it's not.
There's only one bank. There's only one bank. There's if one of the systemically important banks goes down, that'll be it. If one regional bank goes down, that could almost be it, unless they quickly bandage that, which they did with the regional bank bailout. But Phil, I wanted to ask you. There's this issue also in March that the regional bank bailout, it was a year alone, right? It wasn't just like it wasn't just like handing money to them; they have to pay it back. So it was a year, so they have to pay it back in March. What exactly do they have to pay back, and how is that possible?
I think they have to pay back the funds they borrowed, I think from the FDIC or maybe just directly from the Fed. But I mean, what are they going
And
to
they
pay
get
back?
their securities. They get these securities they gave them on collateral back.
Yeah, but I mean, they're not going. They don't have the money. They're not going to pay it back. Everyone knows they're not going to pay it back. This is nonsense.
Right. So
I mean, they don't have. Banks are failing now. Like a bank failed 2 days ago. Invested in. It was a small bank in Iowa. It was like Iowa State Bank.
Iowa Citizens. Okay, I saw
Iowa
that.
Citizens. Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this: what do you think of the American model? Back to the Rothbardian Anarchy. What do you think of the American model, where the citizenry, the government does have a monopoly on violence, but the citizenry are also armed to the teeth?
These are all great ideas. The thing is, society lends itself or heads towards centralized power systems. That's just where it goes, and there's no stopping it. I mean, we see that in the Bible as well. Like the Israelites started off with no government in the era of the judges. It was just some local warlord that brought the people together, and there was no regulation. And then you end up with you start with a king who has very small powers, and then the king gets more powerful and more powerful, and then it just doesn't stop. And there's no government prescription in the Bible about what we're supposed to do. It's just these are good moral ideas that should be practiced, and these will keep your society more or less intact for as long as possible. But how you're going to enforce them, that's pretty much up to you, exactly what the structure it is that you're going to devise. So there really is no single answer here. Otherwise, God would have gave it to us, in my thinking, but he didn't, which means it doesn't exist.
Oh, okay, so
Uh,
your view is this is inevitable. It's gonna where society will always just be like this country, like the star that collapses and then blows up and then reforms and blows up and then reforms.
yeah, until and unless human nature fundamentally changes, which is, that's not an argument that I can make that it will
Yeah.
happen. It's just a belief that you either have to have or you don't.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
the American Constitution was supposed to be setting all these forces against each other, but then they just decided to all work together.
yeah,
Especially once the money. I'm confused. Is the WEF controlling the end game? My view is no.
no, I
They're
don't think so.
the WEF is like they're a bunch of like theoretical champagne communists. They have a bunch of money. They sit around. They talk about wouldn't the world be wonderful if we controlled everything? And they're going to try and control everything, but it's gonna blow up in their face.
Mhm.
They might get dragged through the streets. I don't know.
I think the WEF is like, I'm not saying that I'm a fan of them or they're not in charge of anything or that they're completely irrelevant. They're not completely irrelevant, but people make way too big of a deal out of them because they're very weak. They don't have any influence other than what the spending power gives them. So they're a target for people to look at to see what is going on a proxy basis. But I wouldn't say that they themselves are causing anything. I think they're more of a symptom of the problem than the problem itself. The problem again is not any single group of people or any single decision maker or group of decision makers anywhere. The problem is that the system itself is so convoluted that one part cannot control the other part, and they're all fighting for influence on the top of it, and we just get raped on the other end of it.
Yeah,
So
I think if we were like still on a true gold standard, I don't think an organization like the WF would be. I mean, it might exist, but it would not be their ideas would not be entertained. Inflation is what's allowing these crazy ideas to be entertained because it's like, well, let's try it, see if it works, right?
yeah. So it goes back to the answer. Like you've got to just stop the inflation, and once you do, we can rebuild. And the WEF goes away, and the WHO goes away, and all these three-letter organizations they go away, or they just become irrelevant because people
Sure.
aren't going to have time to talk about climate change when they don't know where their next meal is coming from. They're going to have to figure out how to grow food or how to buy food and trade with somebody who has food so they can eat it. Right?
Let me ask you this: if we were to live in, if Israel was to start living exactly according to the Torah as you see it, would they
Mhm.
be able? And like they went on back onto a silver standard or a gold standard, would this like corruption, expansion of the system, collapse of the system, rebuild, would that fundamentally stop or would it continue?
If we lived by the Torah economic system,
Yeah,
um,
I
that's
haven't read the Torah. So I don't know anything about it.
right. Well, it's a system of basically voluntary charity. The taxes cannot go above 10%. A king cannot tax you more than that. And look, it would be a very big adjustment here, and a lot of people would be very poor in the immediate aftermath. But again, one of the reasons that I'm here is that every country is going to have to fall back on its culture that built it. And if that's not there, there's nothing to fall back on. So when people become suddenly poor, are they going to, let's say, exercise their Christian values and be gracious to their brother and try to work together and not steal each other's food, or is it just going to be pandemonium? So I would say that if we did go back to the system of the Torah as it is written there, it would be much better, but it would require a lot of hard work in the beginning and willingness to do that. And there is no willingness to do that until the dollar itself dies. There's no willingness in this country to become independent. The only time that Israel was ever independent, really an independent country, that determined its own foreign policy, its own domestic policy, everything was in the 60s, which is why in 1967 we succeeded so crazily and nobody expected it because we were really on our own. We had no help. And so we were like, well, we either do this or we die. And so we just did it. And so I think that in the same way that when we're really pressured, like if Iran decides to come in and the dollar collapses and America's not protecting us anymore, and then we come to the conclusion that, okay, we have to do this or we're all going to die, then we'll win. But we're not anywhere near that yet, because we still have a stupid sugar daddy hanging out all of his boats on Cyprus, with his targets on Lebanon, and we're just, it's hard. Like, that's what people don't understand. I you look at my Twitter feed. Look, I'm not pro war. I don't enjoy war, but like, our people was just attacked. So we have to do something. And no, I don't want anybody else involved in it. And I understand that the state's involved in it. I understand the state did it. I understand that. So first we have to deal with the enemy, and then we have to deal with the state, which is behind it. So we're not going to be able to do that until America goes away.
I'm working on it. I'm writing my senator.
Yeah. It sounds suicidal to some people. I understand that, but I guess you have to be faith-based to live here.
Yeah, I was going to say,
why the hell would I leave America to come to the Middle East? Am I insane? Yeah, I am. Well, why would any Jew do it? Because he's crazy to some degree.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a faith-based interpretation of where this is going to go. So
yeah, I can't separate myself from that. I can only just be honest about it. That's all.
That's all anyone should be. All right, any other questions? Let's see if anyone's got anything for us. Somebody was saying, living biblically, the book of Enoch is not the Bible. I don't know if that's related to Torah or something.
Yeah, that's the pseudepigrapha. It's a book about Hanoch, who was taken up into heaven in Genesis. Nobody knows why, and like, it's really freaky. And so somebody wrote a book about it, but it's not really in the Bible.
Oh, okay. Some side book.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot of like religious writing at that time, and I know some of it, like, people were debating, like, what do we put into this, like, final form. A lot of it didn't make the cut.
Yeah.
Fine. So it's non sequitur.
So I guess the simple answer to that question: do I think a Rothbardian anarchy is possible? No, I don't think it's possible. I think it's a goal to keep your eye on. It's like saying, is a crime-free world possible? But no, but that's what we should be. That's what we should be
That's a good
striving
answer.
for. So you should always keep in mind, like, that the goal is as minimum government as possible. And when you introduce some kind of a power, that is going to be a danger. And the way to keep government small is to make sure that money is honest. If you focus on that, if that is the goal of your society, to keep theft at a minimum, the size of government will fall in line with that. And maybe if you're honest for a long enough time, and people can build up enough skills and build up enough moral, could you say moral skill? Like, if you're in a society that is inherently moral, then your kids grow up moral, and it exercises that muscle in the mind. Then it's possible to sustain it for longer, as long as you keep the monetary system honest. You just have to focus on that one thing, and everything else flows from there, I think.
Yeah. I grew up in the 80s and 90s in the American school system, and I as an adult, I remember, like, the everyone's a winner trophy, and like the kids are just misunderstood, they're not misbehaving, like the whole the sea change from the more traditional, like, correct bad behavior and promote good behavior, to, like, just talk about your emotions all day. And it really did a number on everybody. It was an experiment, and I think it was a very bad one. Now, as an adult,
it has to do with wealth. It has to do with wealth again. It goes back to the inflation, because once you can make money so easily, then you don't have to work hard. If you don't have to work hard, everything comes to you, and then you can just, like, loosen up, and your morals get all loose, and your insecurities start to rise, and then you realize you're not being fulfilled by all the money you're making, and then you go crazy.
and
So
you might be a
you'll have to,
14-year-old girl, exactly.
yeah. I mean, you have that, but that's the curse of Eden. That's really the curse of Eden. He's saying, like, well, if you're going to disobey me, if you're not going to follow God, if you're not going to follow his advice, then I'm going to make you work hard, because that's the only way to keep you in line.
All right, we got a bunch of people asking, please explain reverse repos. I will explain it. I'll give the very simple definition, and I'll pass it off to Rafi.
Right.
The government printed so much money and during the COVID print that they couldn't find a place to put it. And if they had put it into the system, like if it had gone into the banking system, we'd probably be in the end game right now, right this very second. So what they did was they offered a reverse repo where they told the banks, okay, keep it here and we'll pay you interest on this. And it never really entered the monetary system. So it's sort of as if they never really printed it. But now the banks need the dollars. So it's draining at an accelerating rate out of the monetary system into the banking system as the banks are paying off their loans and destroying the existing dollars. So it's keeping the end game at bay, but it's as if the Fed had never printed the money and is now like printing it now. It could have been that way instead. But it's like I said, it's keeping the end game at bay, but only briefly. I think only a couple more months. And I'll pass off to Rafi. Maybe he can explain it a little more technically.
Well, let's explain it less technically. They printed a bunch of money, they couldn't fit it in, and it's going in now. That's basically what you said. So Daniel Oliver says this is just delayed QE. We're still doing QE.
Yeah.
Right? The Fed's balance sheet is dropping, but that's QT, but it's being canceled out by the QE, which is why we haven't seen an implosion yet.
Yeah, they would not, if they hadn't printed ungodly amounts of dollars in 2020, they would not be able to do any QT right now. They would still be printing. So they just printed so much that they can make it look like, oh, we're really getting the system under control now, but they're not.
So what I'm struggling to really put my finger on with this is that we see the money supply, it's still stable or falling very slowly. So with all of this money that goes from the reverse repos into the monetary system, into the banking system, what exactly is canceling out that flow to keep the money supply deflating? What is actually happening?
What's the paying off of loans? So when the loans get paid off, the deflationary collapses. That's the deflationary collapse. Like if you pay off the loan, you're actually destroying the dollars. So the interest rates have gone up. People are not borrowing anymore. In fact, they're trying to pay off the loans or defaulting on the loans that they can't pay off, and that's destroying the money supply. And so more dollars or the dollar supply. So more dollars are flying out of reverse repos to cover the banks who cannot cover their loans out because they have this. It's like if you lost your job and you had money in your mattress, right? And you needed to pay off a loan, you'd go to that dollars in your mattress and pay off the money there.
Right. So let's put it this way, right? A bank has a loan, like people are paying off the low interest rate loans that they took out during the low interest rate era that's been around since 2008, right? Whenever exactly the loan came, if it was a fixed rate, they're paying that off. When they pay that off, the money supply that was represented by that debt is now annihilated. So that money supply goes away. But people aren't taking out new loans because why would you take out a new loan at, if you want a mortgage at 8% now, that's too much. So people aren't buying houses because they don't want to pay 8%, or people aren't taking loans because the interest rates are too high. So you have loans being paid off from the past when interest rates were low, new loans not being taken out because interest rates are now too high, and therefore the money supply is showing debt and money annihilating themselves, but no new loans being taken out. So the money supply falls despite the flows in from the reverse repos. So then you say, what happens when there are no more reverse repos to flow into the system? That's when the money supply really plunges, like fast.
Very fast. That's what Mikhail Kalishnikov says. Ponzi doing Ponzi things. That's it. You just have to remember this is a Ponzi. And truly, truly, truly a Ponzi. I'm not saying it's a scam. I'm not saying, the system's messed up. I'm saying this is truly a Ponzi. Once you understand that, everything else just falls into place.
Yeah, every other Ponzi scheme in history has been an isolated Ponzi scheme within the Ponzi scheme of the monetary system that kept going. But we're talking about the Ponzi pyramid, the pyramid that I show on the introduction to all my videos now, that inverted pyramid, that is a Ponzi pyramid, that entire thing. And the entire thing is going to fall. And when the entire thing is going to fall, who knows what happens to the human race? It will be fine. I don't think we're going to go extinct. But if God's going to change our brains to become more logical, or change something in our hearts, or bring us back to the time before the first sin of man, when he ate from the tree of knowledge, that now would be the time.
Lau Peter asks, how is this a Ponzi? That's going to take too long to answer in the 5 minutes we have left. So I would go to my channel, The Bitter Draft, and watch the first 6 episodes. That'll explain it all for you. I did that. Mine is a class, and my channel is a class on why this is a Ponzi. Watch the first 6 episodes, then you'll understand.
Well, very basically, the dollar is a Ponzi because you need new dollars to pay off the old dollar debt. And you continually need new dollars to pay off the old debt because you can't pay off if the dollar supply wasn't expanding and all debt were paid off, there would be no money left in the system, and then everyone would have nothing, or no dollars.
Yeah.
At least you just have
It would be
gold,
whatever the gold was in Fort Knox, if it's even there. I don't know.
right? If you do not expand the dollar supply, the dollar supply eventually annihilates itself as money and debt pay each other off, and then you're left with the gold left on the Fed's balance sheet. That's hyper deflation. It would be the same thing in terms of purchasing power for the people with gold and silver. It would just be nominally very different.
Chris Chaos, do you think war would have started if Trump was in office? What I'll say is the system needs the debt to increase exponentially, no matter what. There are powerful emergent forces that need the debt to expand exponentially. And we're at this end phase where it's like a crack addict who desperately needs crack and will do anything to get it. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know is the answer. The system certainly wants more wars because wars are great. It's a great place to stuff debt. So the system is trying war. Now, Trump did a pretty good job of keeping us out of war while he was in there. Would have been able to resolve this. I mean, he's talking very belligerently, but I don't, he talks belligerently all the time. Then when he gets in the meeting room, he doesn't necessarily act as belligerently. So I don't know is the answer to that.
No, I don't think Trump would have changed anything. It might. I'm not saying Trump is worse than Biden. I don't think it's possible to be worse than Biden. But if this had happened in Israel when Trump was in office, he'd just double down on American help and make everything worse. Like what we need is America out of here, not America coming here with their weapons and assuring our security. That's very, very bad.
Well, while paying Iran at the same time. I mean, that's the system needs this war. It's like paying two guys to go fight. It's like, I'll give you $50 to go beat up that guy over there, and he walks over and like, I'll give you $50 to go fight him. And they start fighting. You're like, yeah,
Yeah. Like the only way for the war to end is for someone to win, and the world won't let that happen. And Israel doesn't have the spine to win. So there's going to be another round.
All right, backup plan to replace the USD, a different form of crack addiction. It will go back to gold, and everyone's going to say, every government on God's green earth is going to say, we'll never do this again, and then they're immediately going to start printing notes over their gold again. So but we will probably have a few years, maybe even a good few years of sound monetary systems again, because it's gonna hurt so much that everyone's going to say, let's never do that again. But then in a few generations, they'll forget.
All right, it's 5:02. I gotta get dressed. I'm going to a barbecue at a friend's.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Any final questions, thoughts, anything? No. Okay. All right. Well, so just a note from my channel, I'm probably not putting out a video this week because I'm still reading The End of Money, and my next video is going to be a book review of The End of Money and what I thought of it.
When Money Dies.
Oh, the written mark was backed by commercial property of commercial goods. I remember reading that somewhere.
Was that really what made it work? I have a hard time believing that that's what made it work.
You know what? It might have just been global charity. People were looking at the Germans saying, good God, they're in such bad shape. We'll just take their marks and give them some peace.
I mean, what would have worked? I think what actually worked, because I suspect that the Renton mark being backed by commercial property, that's just like a story that's told. It might be true. I don't know. It sounds off to me. But what probably would work to get the Weimar out of hyperinflation is the people of Germany just export their stuff for dollars, and then they have dollars, and then you put the dollars in the central bank, and then you just make them exchangeable for a Renton mark. That would do it.
Oh, real quick, one last question. Jersey Prepper, I want to move to Israel. How do I bring my gold and silver with me?
Sell it there and then buy it here.
There you go.
That's it.
All right.
I mean, I can hook you up if you really want to do that. I can hook you up with some people who will do that for you. So comment or email me. It's endgameinvestor@gmail. I think everybody knows that anyway.
And I could be reached at thebitterdraft@gmail.com.
Okay, yeah. Check out Phil's channel, The Bitter Draft, on Rumble, and pray for peace.
Absolutely. Peace through victory.
Peace through victory. Peace through victory.
Take care, Rafi. Have a great one.
All right, bye.